If you're interviewing one of the biggest rock stars in the world, you should definitely do your research. And you also probably shouldn't confess to your most explicit fantasies. When it comes to rowdy and misbehaving rock stars, Queen guitarist Brian May isn't typically the first name that comes to mind. In fact, he usually comes across as a rather calm gentleman, but even a gentleman has his limits. During an interview with the Dutch news program Twee Vandaag, May made it clear that he wasn't really there by choice. As the conversation continued, he looked visibly uncomfortable and annoyed. He eventually interrupted the interviewer to ask if they were going to discuss an upcoming show or continue playing clips for him to watch.
What matters to me tonight is the show.
May then shook the interviewer's hand and motioned to leave, but he then returned and apologized. However, he ultimately proceeded to leave once again. In the 2010s, Brian Stars interviewed a number of high-profile musicians on his YouTube channel, and one of his most awkward exchanges happened in 2010 with Avenged Sevenfold guitarists Zacky Vengeance and Sinister Gates. While backstage at a concert, Brian Stars began by asking the rockers fairly generic and harmless questions. When the conversation turned to the meaning behind their music, Gates started to answer, but then Vengeance looked around and disappeared, leaving his bandmate to finish the rest of the discussion by himself. While discussing the incident years later, Brian Stars expressed how disappointed he was with what happened, though he also took his share of the blame. As he put it, overall, that was a very bad interview. One of the band members walked off, the other member clearly did not want to be there, and I would definitely say they were rude to me. But again, I don't blame them. I wasn't prepared, I didn't do my research, and I wasn't a very good interviewer at the time.
And you know, when you're a band like Avenged Sevenfold and you're as big as you are, if someone's gonna do an interview with you, they should do their research.
Heavy metal band Motley Crue have been involved with plenty of controversies over the years, including some less than friendly interviews. One of the most memorable exchanges happened in 2015 when lead singer Vince Neil appeared on the radio show Tanner in the Morning. Neil was called up to discuss what was then supposed to be one of the Crue's final shows together, although they would eventually come out of retirement in 2019. The host pivoted to ask about the feud between Motley Crue and Lars Ulrich of Metallica, as Crue drummer Tommy Lee had taken a dig at Ulrich on social media. Neil, however, denied knowledge of any tension between the two bands. The host pressed on, though, detailing how Metallica accused Neil of lip-syncing on stage. Neil denied the accusation and then hung up live on the air. Interviews often involve walking a fine line, as many people don't feel comfortable discussing their personal lives with the media. So a conversation can easily go off the rails if a boundary ends up getting crossed. In 2006, Preston, the lead singer of the English indie band The Ordinary Boys, appeared on Celebrity Big Brother and made headlines after he married the eventual winner of the season, Chantal Houghton. The couple even secured a six-figure deal from a major publication to cover their wedding. But Preston wasn't too keen to discuss his then-wife when he appeared on the comedy panel game show Nevermind the Buzzcocks in 2007. The show features its fair share of tomfoolery, and Preston appeared to be having a good time. That is, until Simon Amstel pulled out Houghton's memoir and proceeded to poke fun at it. The audience chuckled as Amstel read passages from the book. Preston didn't have much of a reaction at first, but eventually got up from his chair and walked off the set. Machine Gun Kelly isn't exactly known for taking the high road when something upsets him. He's been involved in multiple feuds over the years, and in 2018, he found himself rattled during an interview at the Billboard Hot 100 festival. The nearly 12-minute conversation tackled a variety of topics, and nothing seemed to be too far out of the ordinary until the singer started to discuss his daughter and the music he writes for her. He became visibly emotional, while also addressing the hate he's received from fans for penning these songs. MGK also admitted that he doesn't feel like he's any good at interviews and better expresses himself through his music. At one point, he stopped his own train of thought and said,
"Man, I don't want to talk about this. Dude, I've done this so many times, dude. Can we just, I don't want to do an interview, man."
He then added that he had nothing further to say and urged people to listen to his music instead, ending the interview right then and there. The celebrity journalist Nardwuar is known for his over-the-top, excitable interviewing style. It's pretty much his signature gimmick. While most of the musicians he's interviewed appear to be in on the joke, that wasn't exactly the case for former Slipknot member Chris Fehn, aka Number 3, in 2005. While talking with Fehn and Sean Cran, Nardwuar proceeded to ask his usual array of playful and lighthearted queries. Cran went along with it, while Fehn only chimed in occasionally and fidgeted the whole time. 3 minutes were all that Fehn could stomach of Nardwuar's shtick, as he raised his finger when the microphone was put in front of his face, and simply walked away as the camera continued to roll.
Number three has definitely left the building.
The Marilyn Manson abuse allegations shocked the music industry in 2021, but rumors about him had already been spreading for years, especially involving his former girlfriend, Evan Rachel Wood. But he wasn't exactly willing to talk about that when the topic came up in interviews. In September 2020, Metal Hammer's Dave Everly had the chance to conduct a phone interview with Manson to coincide with the release of the rocker's new album, We Are Chaos. Everly also took the opportunity to ask Manson about Wood, but the musician ended the call as soon as her name came up. Metal Hammer revealed that it had attempted to set a follow-up interview with Manson to provide him a chance to tell his side of the story. They sent 10 questions to his UK public relations representative, who answered them on his behalf and stated that he was advised to not make any further comment. English punk band the Sex Pistols were famous for their in-your-face attitude and refusal to conform to society's norms. Lead singer John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, carried over that same attitude to his next project, Public Image Limited. In 1979, Lydon and the rest of his latter band notoriously appeared on an episode of the show Check It Out. Presenter Chris Cowie showed footage to Lydon of English punk band Angelic Upstarts dissing Lydon and Pill. Lydon dismissed the comments, but Cowie kept on pressing. Lydon eventually replied, "Look, I don't have to explain myself to anybody, and I ain't going to really bother. Now I was asked here, right, to interview with the band here, Pill. But now we're facing a cheapskate comedy interrogation act, and it just ain't on, pal."
It's a joke. It's a farce.
Cowie tried to push for an answer one more time, but that's when Lydon got up and walked off the set. In 2012, Brian Stars interviewed rising rock band Never Shout Never for his YouTube channel. At one point, lead singer Christopher Drew expressed his disappointment at Brian Stars' questions and interview style. He explained how his band members are real musicians and everyone wanted to talk about questions related to the music and not other trivial topics. Brian Stars then pivoted and asked the band to discuss their brand new album, but Drew was still irritated by their previous exchange, so he promptly wrapped up the interview right then and there.
Love you guys, you fans. This is for you, not for this guy.
Afterwards, Brian Stars spoke out about his disappointment with the interview, explaining how he had driven over 7 hours to interview the band and felt like he'd been embarrassed on purpose.
If he didn't want to do the interview, he should have just said no, you know?
There was an aura surrounding Prince that was unlike any other musician, or any other person, really. When he walked into a room, there was a mixture of gasps or screams from the audience. He was a bona fide superstar in every sense of the word, and that was plenty clear in 2010, when he left the panel on The View starstruck after unexpectedly sauntering onto the stage during one episode. Prince was in New York City for a concert at Madison Square Garden, so he decided to drop by The View's studio for a visit. He sat down next to Sherry Shepherd, who was clearly in awe of his presence. After Prince promoted his concert and had a little back and forth with the hosts, he was preparing to say his goodbyes. But then things got a little awkward when Shepherd made a rather personal confession.
You don't understand, Prince. I have wanted to make love to you for my whole life.
Prince then shot right up from his chair and left the stage. Years later on her own talk show, Shepherd expressed no regrets over the moment. However, she did admit that her co-host Whoopi Goldberg wasn't exactly thrilled about her behavior that day. At the height of their fame, Motley Crue were pretty much the embodiment of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that was probably more true about drummer Tommy Lee than anyone else in the band. In 2009, he met up with the Guardian's Tom Bryant for an interview while also bringing along a female companion. Lee admitted that he'd only met the young lady that morning, while also teasing, "We're going to have more fun than humans are allowed to have." As Bryant attempted to conduct the interview, he struggled to keep Lee focused as his companion tried to seduce him. Eventually, Lee caved in to temptation and called time on the interview, while remarking, "Look at how beautiful she is." According to Bryant, Lee returned 10 minutes later for another interview without his lady friend. Glam rock was huge in the 80s, but many artists don't like being associated with certain acts of that era. During a 2000 discussion with Much Music, former Skid Row singer Sebastian Bach lost his patience after a reporter dared to draw a parallel between Skid Row and the band Poison. The conversation started off pleasantly enough as Bach discussed his role in the Broadway version of Jekyll and Hyde. But then things took a turn for the worse when the reporter mentioned a glam rock tour featuring Poison and other bands. It was clear that he was leading up to a question about Skid Row being a part of this retro tour, But Bach snapped back, insisting that he couldn't see any similarities between Poison and Skid Row. It didn't get any better from there, as Bach declared that he was insulted and cut the interview short.
I'm on Broadway. I don't want to talk about Poison.
Singer-songwriter Beck never looks particularly excited to do most interviews, and it wasn't any different when he was subjected to Nardwuar's goofy antics in 2008. On the contrary, it went about exactly as anyone who knows anything about Beck would have expected. For the most part, Beck humored Nardwuar's questions with curt responses, only elaborating when it was a topic that piqued his mild interest. But Nardwuar didn't let up, eventually asking Beck why people should care about him.
I have no idea.
Nardwuar continued to probe, asking the same question and adding, "They're not, according to you, caring about your hair, your song Why Don't You Kill Me, and a coffin and a squeegee in your video." That moment seemed to be the final straw that broke the camel's back, as Beck hung up the phone, but not before replying,
Just fuck off.